Hey, everybody, the Legions of the Unspoken coming to us again to check out our spoken word edition of the Unspoken Decade. Been a bit too long since we've done one of these, and just to shake things up, old Dean Compton here has brought in a couple of new fellas. Jesse Starcher of Source Material, thanks for joining us and being a regular contributor here. How you doing tonight?
Oh, man, I am excited to talk on the UnspokenDecade.com. Holy cow. I'm glad to be contributing to a page that I absolutely love. It's great to be here.
Hey, we're glad to have you done a bunch of great work, over at Source Material. Everybody go check that out at the Radulich Broadcasting Network. And I tell you what, we got a rook, somebody who's never done a whole lot of podcasting or blogging or, reading, writing, arithmetic. I'm sure he's done a little bit of that. But Chris Armstrong, you never done a podcast before, but you've been such a great contributor on the 90s site as well as the Unspoken Decade. I invited you into the fold. We're happy to have you here. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I've never done one of these podcasts before. I listen to a lot, but I'll probably be doing a lot of listening today, but looking forward to it.
Well, get ready for the fan mail. That's what I really want to tell you about. Get ready for the stalkers. Get ready for, the Beetle fucking mania here, bro. Like, it's going to be like ladies chasing you in cars. That's not going to happen. Let me just rephrase that. But it's good to have you, and it's great to be talking some 1990s comics again. And this time we're focusing on The Hacker Files, a comic book that I think a lot of people don't know much about. It's published by DC Comics in 1992 to 93. It got 12 issues, and I think the main character made one other appearance. The main character, Jack Marshall, known as Hacker. And what's funny is I didn't know anything about The Hacker Files. Obviously when it first came out, us first getting into comic books, and it wasn't something that would have attracted me. I mean, he didn't have a DC card. How the fuck was I supposed to know about him? Because that's how I knew about everybody at the time, about the trading cards, right? So he appeared, and I don't remember what issue it was, but he appeared in an issue of Justice League Quarterly. And it's a really good issue where, like, Booster Gold was dealing with his haunted past that takes place in the future. Y'all understand that stuff. I don't got a problem with that. But Hacker has to show up to deal with some computer stuff. And then I asked my friend, I was like, who's this guy? It's like, oh, he had his own comic book. And so I never really, I could never find issues of it. I don't think the print runs were especially large. I don't have any confirmation of that, but I would assume they weren't, because I never saw it on a shelf, even though I was going to the comic book store every week then. Jesse, do you know anything about Hacker coming into this?
No, absolutely not. Let me tell you, I once went to an auction, believe it or not, and found a ton of like 90s comics real cheap. And one issue, which I think was issue 3 of Hacker Files, was in there. Now, I had no inclination to pick this up and read it because I didn't have the full run. I didn't want to jump into the middle of a story. I had no idea. And I had no clue what this was about. I saw DC on the cover, but I still was like, I've never even heard of this character, never even heard of this title. So it was something that just sat in a long box forever and a day. And then you messaged me and said, hey, are you interested in maybe checking this out and talking about it? And I was like, yeah, I remember seeing the cover, and it's a very unique looking comic book on the cover. And when you get into the inside as well. So it's like something that will catch your eye. It definitely didn't pop like the 90s comics that we're all used to. That's for sure. It's something that was more along the lines. It felt real subtle and different to me. So yeah, going into this completely blind, it's going to be a fun discussion though.
So, and from what I understand, in our discussion before, we started, Chris, you're kind of in the same boat. And I know you'd like never even heard of it. Didn't even find it in a long box at an auction, like before and asked Jesse.
Yeah, it hit sort of in the prime time for me buying comics, 92, 93. That was when I was getting really super heavy into them. But I'd never heard of it. I'd never come across any issues. I didn't get to go to many comic shops around that time. I got most of my comics at a convenience store that was a short walk from my house. I'm sure if I'd been in the comic shops a lot, I might have caught an issue here or there, but I'd never heard of it. So it was kind of a neat surprise to find a kind of a forgotten 90s comic that I'd never heard of.
What convenience store was it? Was it a 7-Eleven?
It was a Huck's.
Huck's. The only convenience store I ever saw comic books at was at a 7-Eleven. And like, I was like, we had gone on vacation to Springfield, Missouri, 4 hours from the burgeoning metropolis of Batesville, Arkansas, where I grew up. And like, I was like, fucking Yakov Smirnoff from like the Long John Silver's commercial. I was like, comics at a convenience store? What a country, like I could not, So it's cool that like your primary outlet was a convenience store. That's neat.
Yeah. I think the first comics I ever got, my mom picked up for me at a drugstore off a spinner rack. I kind of got hooked on them, so then I found this Huck's down the street that had them, so I was there all the time picking them up.
Right on. Well, if you had seen the Hacker Files, like Jesse mentioned, the first thing that you would have noticed if Huck's had went ahead and ordered a couple of these, and honestly, it may have been direct market only. I can't say, it's kind of hard to find that information out.
I was going to say, since we don't have, I couldn't get physical copies, but from the scans that I was looking at, that I was able to check out, it looks like it was probably like a prestige format type, kind of like Green Arrow around that time, Longbow Hunters. Some of the other DC stuff, it was probably at a higher price point than,
definitely the higher price,
whatever. It just looked like they had the higher quality paper, stuff like that. So it was probably something that didn't show up on newsstands, I would guess.
Yeah, it was definitely, when you look at it, it kind of feels more like a Vertigo book, like just the look. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like the pages, the coloring, etc. But it's not a Vertigo book. It's decidedly set in the mainstream DC universe. But before we get to all that, I want to talk a little bit about the creators. Louis Shiner was the author, and he's apparently a very well-known cyberpunk author, which, I didn't know shit from Apple Butter about him. I don't read much, many cyberpunk novels, but he's well established in that field, and he was produced by, I think it was he was approached by Robert Greenberger. Maybe you come up with a title, and he worked an unpublished novel he had into this concept. Tom Sutton's the penciler, and he is credited as the co-creator of Jack Marshall. I think his pencils were great. I think honestly, the first thing I want to tell you about is it's really weird, Jesse. It's a book that like you shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that it's called The Hacker Files. There's going to be a lot of computer shit in it, but it's presented in such a way that like I don't think any of it would go over anybody's head then or now, especially now, but even not then, when a lot of the concepts it was talking about, the internet, DOS, RAM, etc., like these things were not in the common lexicon at that time. But if you had read this comic, it's not like that would have dissuaded you or kept you from enjoying it.
Yeah, you're right. It does a good job of handling pretty complicated concepts and bringing them down to a level where a typical reader can pick up the book and have no problem understanding what's going on. That's the mark of a good writer right there. When they can bring something as tough to explain as computers. Trust me, I've got parents who would probably rather, stick with pen and paper and cursive than work on a computer in any way, shape, or form. But you could give them this book and they'd be like, okay, well, I understand what's going on here, and it's a good story.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, especially in 1992, I'm of the mindset, Chris, that like if I had read this book then, I would have learned much more about computers than I ever learned in school, because I kind of missed the internet stuff. We got the internet at my high school at my graduation year.
Right. Yeah, I was as far from computer literate as could be at this, which I was 92. I would have been 12 probably when this came out. I don't think we got, like, my family didn't get internet access till I think I was 17. So, I mean, I was, I wouldn't have been able to know. All I knew from internet is what I would see on, Seinfeld, or if they were talking about it on TV,
Yeah.
Or those goddamn AOL discs that everybody got.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I would have probably been able to pick up everything from the comic, just as well. It wasn't overly complicated.
No, he presented it in a way. It is funny, though, before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, like some of the stuff you see, you're like, oh, that's cute. Because like computers have come so far since then. I mean, it's fucking 26 years ago. But like, what was it, Jesse? At one point he goes, that thing's loaded. It's got 100 megabytes of RAM.
Yep. Yeah, he went off. I came real close to like snapshotting it and bringing it so I could read it off verbatim tonight. But yeah, he's like talking about how it's got an optical disk drive and 100 meg of RAM, and it's got. I'm just like, wow. I mean, that's the problem when you run into a story that you're going back and reading that's 20. Well, we're talking 26 years now. It dates itself, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. That's the whole point of the book, is to let you know about the times that it was in. then, because these were very, I mean, really things haven't changed, but the 90s and computers and the government and all that, scary times. It was scary stuff going on back then. You didn't know if you should be able to trust a computer. I mean, Terminator had just come out. I don't trust I don't trust the computer as far as I could throw it back then. It's interesting to see those terms. I actually have a video on my Facebook that I posted. I got into computers. You guys was talking about getting into computers. I got into computers via my stepdad, who was a computer programmer, and my
your stepdad hacker?
He was not hacker. He was not a hacker. And my friend who I roomed with at college, he went in there and was doing the computer science thing before math decided to kick his ass. But he was trying that. So I learned a lot from both of them. Well, I have a video on my Facebook feed, probably from 93 or 94. So a couple years after this came out, where my stepdad and my buddy are sitting down talking about building a PC, and they're trying to like one-up each other. Like, oh yeah, I got this one with the CD-ROM, and I've got the sound. Oh man, I wish I could remember. You used to have to buy sound cards, right? That stuff was all built in. So they were just trying to one-up each other. I mean, and then they dropped the price of a computer, how much it would cost to put that thing together, and it just like $1,300 or some crazy crap like that. And of course, that was high end at the time, but that's kind of a nostalgia feel for me as well, just to be able to listen to that. And I lived through those times, man. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like you talked about Terminator, it definitely touched on like stuff like war games.
Yes.
I think this was right before hackers came out. This was at a time when I think people knew the term. I think they knew what hacker was. It was like, oh, that's the computer with the cha-cha-cha on the keyboards and everything. But like, nobody really knew. And to be honest, most of us still don't exactly know what any of that would mean, but this comic book does a pretty good job of telling you how it was, at those times. The main character is Jack Marshall. He's referred to as hacker on the message boards and stuff, which is really funny to me because like, that's like the most fucking generic name
it is now.
Right. Well, I mean, I think even then though, he's like, hey, I'm going to go on this hacker message board. Who are you? Oh, I'm hacker. Oh, but when I go on my cooking message board, I'm chef. So, it's fine. I mean, I'm not making it was appropriate. To be honest, it works for him. It works for the character. It's the right name. But it's funny when you think about it, you're like, oh, he's just described as, what he does. I guess it works though. Like we said, Terminator, war games. It was, very appropriate for the time. But Jack Marshall's a freelance systems analyst. And he, is obsessed with computers ever since he was a kid. Although he's like 40 in 1992, so I don't know what computer he had in like, I know they existed, but like, goddamn, he was playing with some like really rudimentary toys. Eventually, he winds up working for a company called Digitronics, and it's a small company, but their founder has an idea. He's he's your what would you say, Chris? Like, in a lot of genre fiction, he's an entrepreneur who like checks all the boxes. He's a womanizer. He likes music. He's eccentric. He likes drinking, but he wants the big bucks, Chris.
Right.
He decides, he gets some money together, gets some backers, and he comes up with this idea. He's like, what if a computer could do everything? Which honestly was probably a revolutionary idea at the time, because like the stuff he's talking about is stuff we take for granted. What if your computer could play audio? What if your computer could play video? What if you could do these things with it that you already do with other things? And you could get the information from external sources via the internet. Oh my God. It just sounds like Tuesday to us, but in 1992, that's some fucking shit.
Yeah.
So he brings in, he gets the money. The company starts tripling in size. He gets Jack Marshall to write the opsis, as Marshall calls it. But some of the middle management he brings in particular, a real piece of trash named Walter Sutcliffe, denies him royalties because they only, nothing was in writing. He tries to steal his stuff back. It doesn't work, goes over like a fart in church. And he winds up ostracized for the computer industry, but he's still so good, especially at the Digitronic stuff, because he fucking built it, that, he's a freelance, he does freelance work for people, including the government, and in the DC universe. And that's something that we haven't really gotten to. This is very hard rooted in the DC universe. In the first issue, Jesse, you see Sarge Steele, 2 pages in?
Yeah, this is a character that flew under my radar. Now, I'm not the biggest DC fan, but I saw him show up, and I had to go onto the wiki to find out that, this guy, he's a mainstay DC dude, right? I mean, educate me a little bit here.
Well, he started out as a Charlton character.
Okay.
And, DC bought the Charlton characters in the early 80s, approximately like 1983, 84. And, he came over with them. And basically, yeah, he's, I don't want to say he's just like Nick Fury, because DC has a lot of shit like Checkmate and DO and all that stuff. It seems like they have a lot of those type of analogs, but he is one of them. And, his from what I can tell, Chris, his power is basically to, he has a metal hand, which, good for him. That's, it's not super special in the DC universe, but it's still something. But his main power seems to have all the clout he needs to get anything he wants done, whether it's bringing Hacker across the United States in a matter of hours or nailing some intern in the Pentagon, which we also see him.
I know the name Sarge Steel, but I don't think I've ever read a comic with Sarge Steel before this. So I'm not all that familiar with him myself, but he's clearly got a lot of clout. So
I think what they did, they had to bring in somebody from the DCU to make this feel like, hey, this is a DC comic. Right. And what a good way of tying it in there. Now, the problem is that it flew by me altogether. Now, again, once you start throwing the mainstay DC superheroes in this thing, then I'm like, oh, well, wait a second. Now I'm feeling that DC universe feel for sure. But this was somebody that, he's entrenched in he almost felt like he was just a government agent. He was just working for the government. That's what he does, and he just gets stuff done. But regardless, people who are able to pick up on Easter eggs like that, great. That one flew by me, though.
Well, I'll give you another Easter egg right now that might have flown by you as well. Did you remember the General Wade Eiling? Okay, well, he was like, we'll get to the War Game stuff in a minute, but he was the guy running the War Game. And
okay.
He's a Captain Atom supporting character. He's the asshole who, is in charge of Captain Atom, who, is a hardcore, military bureaucrat, United States imperialistic bullshit guy, always right. But he also, hates Captain Atom. And, Captain Atom's stories, he was gone for a while because his atoms dissipated. If memory serves, he got involved with his Captain Atom's wife while Captain Atom was dissipated and stuff, and then became his boss. So it was when he came back. So pretty cool stuff. So there's another little Easter egg they slipped in. You think it would have been more effective to bring bigger guys in sooner to entrench into the DC universe? Or this is the other train of thought, like hot take outside the box. Could this just have not been a DC universe title and been just as enjoyable?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. It seemed I don't know the background. I don't know how much editorial was dictating stuff, but it almost seemed like they were shoehorned in at some point. Like they wanted to make sure that everybody knew this was a DC universe book. And so they were throwing in some of the superheroes. It worked pretty well, but it just seemed a little out of place at times.
Right. It definitely, did seem jarring. Although, like I said, I think it winds up working. Yeah, it works great. We see Starcher Steel very quickly called Soft War, first 4 issues. And basically, Digitronics is, everybody buys Digitronics computers in the DC universe. From what I can tell, there's no Apple, there's no Microsoft, no IBM. Everyone has a fucking Digitronics computer. Everybody in the Pentagon, everybody over in Cheyenne Mountain with NORAD and stuff. And there's a virus. And so they call in Marshall, that Sarge Steel calls in Marshall to deal with it. While he's there, Jesse, he gets there, like I said, through basically takes every mode of transportation possible besides rickshaw to get there as quick as he can. It's like, we're picking you up in a limo. You're going to be on a Learjet. A helicopter will be waiting. Then there'll be a limo. Everything like that. But he gets in there. And I think this is the first part where the first hurdle they really had to jump. How are you going to make computer hacking visually exciting? And what they do, Jesse, I think they do a great job of it, is as soon as Jack Marshall sits down on the fucking computer, you kind of see him, even though he doesn't literally go into the computer, you see his visualization of it like he is inside the computer.
It's kind of like his mind's eye, how he feels it. You look at Jack Marshall, I'm pretty certain, other than being really smart and knowing a lot about computers, this guy doesn't have any powers, right?
No
powers.
Not that I can tell.
You've got to kind of show how this guy is easily able to navigate through a very complicated machine such as a computer. And you see that every once in a while throughout the issues, but a lot of it is focusing on the man trying to deal with the problem and using his smarts to overcome it. So yeah, very interesting artist take on how all that goes down.
Yeah, Tom Sutton's pencils really, really delivered. I enjoy Tom Sutton. I think I've seen a lot of his work on, I want to say Swamp Thing off the top of my head. And I really, really enjoyed that stuff, that stuff there. And his style lends itself to this. Like I said, not just the covers of the book, but the interiors, the art style. It's kind of, it's kind of like a Vertigo book, in a way, in look and feel and everything. But
did he do all the covers as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the covers are. Did he draw it? I thought they were painted, but I'm not sure.
They were trying to appeal to a more mature audience, even though there's not a lot of mature themes throughout this book. It's you're wanting, you can't give this book to somebody in second or third grade who likes Superman and say, hey, go to town. So that was one of the reasons they did those covers like that, so they could pop while they're on the newsstand and make somebody else that's a little bit more, I wouldn't say up in years, but you know what I'm saying, a little bit more along the lines of, hey, that looks like it should be geared towards me.
Right. Somebody who's like 13, 14, looking for something that they would perceive to be avant-garde, if you will.
Exactly.
And I mean, here's the funny thing about mature stuff. Like, usually if you see something and it's like, suggested for mature readers, what it really means is there's going to be gore and titties, right? Like, that's what it really means for the most part. I mean, but like, I would argue this is a very mature book, even though I don't think there's any titties and there's very little gore. So,
right.
I mean, the themes are super mature in a way. Jack manages, to get himself into trouble really quickly. He gets, because the Digitronics guys have also been called in because that's part of the fucking deal, right? Like, they have a service contract. It's all inclusive. So they don't want to work with Jack. He doesn't want to work with them. Sarge Steele has enough clout to be like, look, this is what's up. He takes Jack to them, who then aces him. This is the first time we see Jack's pal from he used to work with him. His name's Yoshio Natsume, and he'll become more important later. But Jack basically goes in there, locks him out, starts doing more work. Sarge Steele goes home and has to lock him in because it's Pentagon, and I guess those are the rules. I don't know. There's certainly the rules in the DC universe, from what I understand. Like, he has to be locked into the office, and Jack, of course, can't just stay in the office. He wants to find out what's going on, elsewhere. He wants to find out what's going on in this server room, especially. And when he goes in there, he gets knocked out, and Chris, he winds up facing who will be the guy who will be the arch nemesis of the book, Sutcliffe. What were your initial opinions of Sutcliffe?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if he was going to be like the big bad right away, but he certainly seemed like an adversary as soon as he showed up.
He seemed like the real sleazy business owner type dude to me. I mean, that was the main thing I got from this guy. Like, he would obviously, all that history he had with Jack and what he did to him in regards to the basically closing him out of his own company. It sounded like, but yeah, this guy was I didn't like him. He was a jerk.
Fucking asshole from the start. They wind up, they kidnap and take him to the hotel where Sutcliffe's staying. They have a very unproductive conversation, to say the least, because when you get knocked out and taken to a hotel, and then some guy that you really hate starts chatting at you, not much going to come out of that. Mm-mm. So Jack manages to they kick him out. He gets out. He gets back to the Pentagon. He fixes the problem there, only to learn that when the problem started, they had cut off NORAD. They cut off Cheyenne Mountain. And by cutting it off, it meant that the virus was still there. He couldn't, and now that it wasn't connected, he couldn't put his antivirus in there from here and get it to go. And if they reconnected it, it could really fuck shit up.
Yeah, let's talk about Cheyenne Mountain. I mean, give our listeners an idea of what is at Cheyenne Mountain.
God, the book goes into great detail about it, but basically it's, they wanted to build something bomb-proof, so they carved out, I don't know how much granite, I don't recall. The book says exactly how much, they built, what is it, three towers inside of it that they put on these giant springs, and then they put it all behind two 30,000-pound doors that only one can be open at a time, and they can close either of them in 30 seconds. And inside is where, arguably the end of the world awaits, because that's where That's where we control a ton of ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Although I can't imagine anybody listening to a superhero comic book podcast doesn't know what ICBM is by now. It's where we control most of that. The Minutemen missiles. It's where commands can be given for the nuclear war, and it's put there, so that these commands can be given even if Washington D.C. and the rest of America, had been atomized. There's something very eerie and impressive about the structure and the way it's presented in software.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes it a lot like, how big of a deal it is when you realize that their systems have been corrupted after they've set up, like how important the structure is.
Right. And because at the same time that he's headed out to Cheyenne Mountain now, Sarge Steele has been called into a war game, the one we were talking about earlier with Wade Eiling and the junior senator from Kansas. I can't recall his name now, but like those are going to be the main. There are other people in the war game. They're playing U.S. versus Soviets, but they're pretending like they're fucking not. Like like these people always do. They're like, it's red versus blue. It's not. We're not really talking about the Soviets. But like the computer virus that's in NORAD is changing this game to where, Jesse, now the game is real.
Oh, yeah. This was the harkening back to war games. Where you're just on the edge of your seat. Is this real or is this not? Are we being bombarded by nukes, or what is going on? Are we at war? And clearly, because of the possibility of this computer virus, it really made people start to question: is this actually happening or not? It's happening right there on the screen that you're seeing. You're watching New York, fall from a big nuclear blast, and all these, whoever's in here, obviously the higher ups that are able to control this stuff, they're freaking out, dude. They are freaking out, like, as to whether this is actually happening or not. Man, it was tense. So I was like, are we over at issue 4 as the world
Did DC stop publishing? Well, the thing is like, the game has become real, and they don't know it. When it first starts, Jack is in NORAD trying to get his antivirus in, and he's accompanied by like the world's like coolest NSA agent. I have to say that, like, this guy's like, this is stupid. He's just flashing his badge anytime any kind of red tape comes up. I think this is probably my only real complaint about the whole all 12 issues, in all honesty. And Chris, I'll get your opinion about it first. Inside NORAD, there's some kind of traitor guy. And I don't think his role is ever clearly defined. Like, were you able to glean exactly what he was doing there, why he was doing the things he was doing?
Not really. I was confused by it, actually.
What about you, Jesse? I don't know what his end game or Digitronics' end game to have made the game, the war game, real momentarily, which I don't think they meant to. The virus just did it. But what was his end game inside? I didn't really glean that from reading it.
Well, I'm kind of on the same page. Now, here's the thing. Read this a while back, made notes, and went over my notes, and I could tell you right now, it either did not feel important enough for me to make a note about it, or it just was something that really flew under my radar. I was more concerned about how Jack was going to stop this thing from taking over and launching all these nukes.
Right, and of course, eventually, Jack does fix it to where the war game is not real. Somehow gets back across the country before this war game is over. Like, how long are they in this room? Like, fucking, 4 days? Even with the helicopter from NORAD to, Washington, D.C., that's a long time. So he gets back, and this is where he starts to mess with it to where, because Jack, he's an anarchist. He wears an anarchy shirt at the Pentagon. He's tired of all governments. Later on, we'll even see he doesn't like the China. He doesn't like the so-called communist countries either, because he'll have run-ins with the Chinese government apparatus at the time. And he goes in, he busts in the war room, and he's like, what if I told you this was all real? Now, Wade Eiling does not like this. He's like, get this guy out of here right now, in his sternest, I have a colonel hat on voice or whatever, general hat, I guess, since, that's what he is. But they go on with the game, and then, the game starts changing for them. Now, like I said, it's saying Soviet, it's saying this, it's saying that. they start and they see New York blow up and they think all this is real. Now, Jack's feeding them at this point. But yeah, Chris, they start fighting themselves about what their response should be.
They were convinced that what was happening was all happening and was happening for real. So they were in panic mode immediately.
Yeah, and they actually wind up with fist fights about what to do because one guy, Wade Eileen's like, kill them all. They took New York. And the junior senator's like, well, fucking, is nuking them going to do any good? Like, why are we going to kill everybody now? And I can understand, both viewpoints. But it turns out that it was all just a lecture from Jack Marshall to these war pig assholes to be like, listen, you're playing games with people, Jesse, and it's not just your lives. You are literally playing a fucking game with everyone's life on the planet.
Yeah, you get to see a very scary side of human nature here when people are making decisions. These are few people are making a decision that it matters to millions of people, and they can't even control themselves. I mean, we see one guy like jumping over and choking the shit out of another dude in the middle of this room because they're trying to figure out what the next step should be. And unfortunately, this is a very real concern for many people because we have this is a representation of government, whether it be an accurate one or not. I can see this easily going down in real life.
We have a room full of 15 to 20 people that can decide if millions die within minutes, basically.
And let's not forget the computer element here. Some shithead wrote a virus that made everybody made everybody start to freak out. They didn't know if things were real or things weren't. And they weren't launching weapons possibly. It was insanity. One of the things I took away from this story arc, our reliance upon technology, the combination of that and human nature can sometimes lead to some very bad things. And I think that's the thing Jack is trying to get across. Hey, look, although he's obviously pro-technology, that's without a doubt, but he's trying to make people realize that, you need to be a little bit more responsible here, a little bit more responsible.
He's also inherently distrustful of all forms of authority. And I think that's a running theme throughout the entire the breadth of the entire comic book, all 12 issues, is that regardless of whether the authority is coming to you with an eagle or a hammer and a sickle, or even just a lapel that says, hello, my name is Doug, you need to really question this authority. And you need to really keep these guys accountable because at some point, and this is my personal opinion. I mean, everybody, knows I'm an anarchist and everything. At some point, most people who have this kind of authority start to exceed the limits of said authority based on the justification that they have said authority. Yeah. And I think that, Chris, that's Jack Marshall's character is inherently aware and distrustful of that throughout all 12 issues.
Yeah, for sure. There's never really any doubt about it. He's not interested in really playing by anybody's rules but his own.
To piggyback off that, when you look at Jack Marshall, he's a hacker. Okay. Yeah. Now they go through and they talk about, they actually define hacker. It's look but not touch.
Right. Hacker versus cracker.
Exactly. So this guy is obviously a master at his game. He can get into computers. So I guarantee you this dude has seen some shit on some government computers that easily makes him say, I don't trust anybody in any type of authority because I've seen the shit that they do and they've never disclosed. I've seen the top secret files, just all this stuff that they have that they hide under closed doors. He's seen all that. So it's very evident to me that is part of his character, and it should be, because if he is indeed a hacker, then he will have seen some stuff that would make him not trust anybody. No,
that's absolutely correct. And it's a good time to get into the fact that Hacker is part of, I wouldn't say a collective, but he has, an impressive support group called the Speed Metal Kids. Apparently these kids all love some speed metal, and they all hack and do their own thing in their own way. And they're going to be very they help them out during the first storyline. They're going to be very prominent in the second storyline, including, and their names are, Sue Denham, who is a heavy metal fan. She's like 15, 16 years old. Freaky Freddy, both of them spelled with a PH. Which is into like phone freaking, which for folks who don't know, I mean, basically at the time you could like utilize, I guess you could utilize tones to make the exchange boxes make calls that they weren't supposed to make, etc. I think that's a very shitty rudimentary way to explain it, but that's more or less how I understand it. Do you guys disagree?
No, I read the same definition. I went and I was like, what the hell is this? All I could tell, though, for sure, was that he was a fan of Nightmare on Elm Street. Just
right. Freaky Freddy dresses as Freddy Krueger the whole time. It's delightful. And then Master Blaster, a 13-year-old African-American kid who seems to be the smartest of them all, to be honest with you. Like, even Hacker. Like, this guy is like, during the next storyline, which again continues to promulgate the distrust of the government, distrust of authority, Operation Moonwitch. He's the guy who gets them to go to secured channels, secured ways to talk. And Operation Moonwitch is actually based on a real thing that happened in the United States, Operation Sun Devil, which was a crackdown on illegal computer hacking around, I think this took place in like 1990. And they did a bunch of raids. Most of them happened in the middle of the night. Most of them, they were enacted by the Secret Service because the laws had changed. So now the Secret Service, that was in their jurisdiction. Most of these raids were violent. They took a bunch of property. They didn't arrest many people. Only like 3 people actually like got convicted. They served 27 warrants though. That's a pretty shitty ratio. I don't know much about math, but that seems like really bad. And most people at the time, you know, especially in the hacking community, they saw it. It wasn't really to like cut down on anything. It was more that, you know, they had given these freakers and hackers, you know, certain amount of leeway, and they were letting them know they weren't going to do it anymore. And they were letting them know it in the most violent way possible. And that's how, you know, that's how this one starts. Is Sue Denham's family, I mean, is woken up at gunpoint by, you know, dudes in masks who won't identify themselves. They're taking all their stuff. And then right before they leave, because they're like, we're taking your daughter. And, you know, the dad's finally like, you know what, I don't fucking care if you got a gun or not, you know, my fucking daughter. They're like, you think we're the burglars, you know? And Chris, it turns out they're the Secret Service.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the really big turning points that really kind of hooked me on the series. I mean, I was liking it already, but that was really jarring. Like using, you know, basically government stooges, you know, ransacking their house in the middle of the night, arresting their daughter, who I don't remember how old she was, but she was a teenager, you know,
13,
right? And it was just like an egregious abuse of power, you know.
And that's the thing too, Jesse, is they don't really arrest her. Like they take her and they take like all their stuff, but they're like, listen, you know, because later on they're questioning her, like, you're not under arrest. We're just asking you a few questions right now. And like, it's really hard for them to get anything done, you know, in regard to this. Jesse, I mean, I don't have a family, but like, can you imagine your reaction in that situation?
Oh, dude, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so
there you go.
If I was the dad here, I mean, geez Louise. And the thing is that technology, we're going to say this many times, it's changing almost every second. It gets more advanced. So, you know, seeing a young girl like this, who is supposedly found out to have been hacking into something, this seems very real to me as well. I'm going to try and protect my daughter from whatever that's going to try and do something like this. It's a bad situation all around, especially if they're just trying to send a message. And what do we find out that she had on her computer? It was
the E911 document, which actually was literally also, like I said, in the real life Operation Sun Devil. That's how they set these guys up too. They put this in a real world zine called Frack. PHRACK, because, you know, we're not using the real letters, y'all. This is the hacking world.
That's right.
And they put it in there, and then the people who like downloaded it, they went messed with. And it turned out that, like, here's the funny part. They like I said, they only got 3 convictions. They arrested a few more people, but most of the people got off because it turned out you could just order this in a mail order catalog. You could just get this information. There wasn't anything special about any of this, in the real world. In this world, these guys have been set up. The speed metal kids have been set up. They did not, download this on purpose. And it's interesting because we get another DC character here. Arguably, I think the character we would most associate with computers in the DC universe, Chris. We see Barbara Gordon, Oracle.
Right, yeah, and it was really cool that she was the first DC character that I really recognized from, like, the other ones you mentioned before, Sarge Steel. I knew those character names, but I didn't even really put them together as I was reading the book. But then when I saw Oracle show up, it made it obvious that it was firmly planted in the DCU as part of the main continuity. And it was really cool seeing her show up. I didn't read a lot of DC books around this time when I was younger. I didn't really get into DC till I got a little older. So it was cool seeing Oracle around that time, which this would have probably just been a few years after The Killing Joke came out.
Yeah, it's definitely post-Killing Joke because she actually gets the E911 document a different way. She's part of she downloads it as part of an investigation she's working on, and this is post-Killing Joke Oracle. And one of the things that I really like, Jesse, that it shows up is Lewis is able to get across, the writer, how tough it is for Oracle to be physically handicapped without making her seem weak or awful or anything, but just like that, like it's like, oh, poor her, whatever. But like it's more like the world isn't set up for her, and even the things that like would be better for her, like getting an apartment on the ground floor, that's for other people in the real world, not for the disabled. And she's constantly sees these barriers, and she, we get to see her in her monologue, Jesse, and she works past them in, I think a really, brave and awesome way to where you never feel sorry for her, but she does show weakness. She never comes across as pitiful, but she does let you know she has some setbacks that I ain't got to deal with because my legs work.
Yeah. That was the first note I made about this storyline, was the fact that we're bringing Barbara Gordon into this, and we're doing a great job of shining a light on her life. Just like you said, the physical limitations that she's run into because she's wheelchair bound. I got a real sense of loneliness from her too. Yeah. I never recall reading anything that really made me feel that way about Barbara Gordon before.
Yeah, I think a lot of times in JLA or Batman, they're like, Martian Manhunter or Batman's like, we need the information on this. She's like, I got it on the comm link. And, which is good. I'm not, knocking that or anything. But like, I don't, and again, somebody's probably going to listen to this and be like, well, actually, in Detective Comics 572 or whatever it was, they talk about this all the time, and I'm sure they have. But I did read a lot of Batman at the time, and I don't recall it coming up a ton. But she's also like not going to be a victim. That's because right. when the Secret Service busts into her house, she, and she's thinking about what happened with her and the Joker. Well, she's got a dirty, hairy fucking gun under her pillow, Chris. And when they come after her, she puts a slug right in that motherfucker's chest.
Right. Yeah. She doesn't really hesitate. And, you never know what the reaction's going to be. But it doesn't turn out too bad for her. But yeah, she didn't hesitate to pull that out and fire away.
Yeah. Now, the guy's okay because this is a comic book, and he's apparently wearing a vest, and everything is fine. We don't have a storyline later where like Oracle's like on trial for killing a federal agent or something, but they do put her in custody. They take all her computers, and she winds up in custody at the same place that Lisa Sue Denham is in. But now, before she gets taken into custody, even before she plugs the Secret Service agent. She made a call to the Justice League Europe liaison, Catherine something. I'm going with Colbert because it's spelled like I think she's supposed to be French or something. That's what I think. But she has some clout, and it turns out that they were able to get in touch with Hacker at some point earlier too. And he's going after Secret Service, and Oracle's worried that Hacker's going to fuck shit up. So she calls her.
This dude, I tell you what, he's just like man on a mission. I'm going in. No doubt, no holding me back.
Don't even care. Like, this is horse shit. You're not messing with my people. And he goes, Catherine Colbert is able to get involved, which then, at the same time, she's starting to move her bureaucratic pieces to kind of figure out what's going on and why people are being detained indefinitely without, any kind of trial, phone call, or charges. A complete, a violation of their rights to habeas corpus. At the same time, Jack Marshall, Hacker, is fucking got his own plan, and he's going to hightail it down to Georgia, where they have Denham and Oracle in custody. And of course, the guy's a computer genius. He's got Freaky Freddy with him. They get inside, and they manage to fool them into get inside, and then like he gets a hold of a computer, and now Chris, the world is his. He can open all the gates. He can get them to the spot to get their stuff back. He can keep security off them for a decent amount of time. I mean, honestly, I think that her apprehension was misguided on Oracle's part, Jack Marshall is just as dangerous as Oracle says he is. They get them out. They want their stuff. They have to get their stuff, which is really funny. So they go into a place, Jesse, and apparently like the federal government has confiscated like every phone and computer in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's all in this big warehouse room. Everything stacked upon stacked wires hanging off everything. What are they doing with all this stuff? They've got some kind of a plan or something that they're trying to make sure to get these electronics out of these youngins' hands. We don't want no more troubles.
Right. I just think it's funny that they're like, oh, here's our stuff right here. I was like, well, that's good that you were able to find it so quickly in this, these towers of electronics.
I have no idea why they want the stereos. I mean, there's stereos in here. I can't see that possibly being a threat, but hell, you never know. Let me tell you something I came across doing some research today, because I thought I saw something about a Pentagon virus or in the early pages of this book. So I did a little research, and there was a story out there in 1991 how supposedly a printer that had a virus on it took down like the Iraqi Air Force defense. All right. So I was like, a printer. Well, it turns out this was all an April Fool's joke, apparently. But there were people in our defense for the government who actually thought it was true and have since taken steps to try and make sure that shit doesn't happen. So that might be why all these electronics are stacked upon each other, because we want to eliminate any threat, no matter what.
I mean, that's certainly concern now, where everything talks to the internet. I think the phrase is like an Internet of Things, like your fucking refrigerator, your microwave, all this can talk to the internet now. So now there's just, I guess, many more points to get a virus into it, So I don't know. Again, I'm not the most computer savvy guy. In fact, I just barely figured out Gmail. I swear to God. It doesn't get much more straightforward than that. But Catherine Colbert, the Justice League Europe liaison, calling in her own guns. She sends Hal Jordan down, to kind of find out what's going on. And when they're making their big break, they're able to get by a bunch of guards. And then Hal Jordan stops them, and they all go have a chat with the Secret Service agent in charge, Catherine Colbert, Oracle, Sue Denham, Hacker, and Hal Jordan. And I gotta be honest, Chris. It was pretty awesome when Catherine Colbert's just going to bat. She's like, you're locking people up, you're not charging them with anything. She's like, this is horrible. She's like, you know what, and Oracle's able to prove that this was all a frame job, that none of them downloaded this virus or anything. The Secret Service agent, she's being kind of wishy-washy. But, dude, did you get the same chill I got when Catherine Colbert's like, I'll go all the way to the president with this if I have to?
Right. She wasn't hearing any of the nonsense. She cut right to the chase pretty much and let her know that she wasn't going to let him get away with it. And that was pretty cool to see her stand up to him like that. Seeing Hal Jordan pop up was also pretty cool and unexpected. I wasn't really sure we were going to see any costumed heroes until he popped up. But yeah.
What were your thoughts when Hal Jordan popped up and about the climax of this storyline, which just takes place in an office with people talking, Jesse?
Well, that's a heavy hitter. I mean, if you're going to send somebody to take care of business, and here comes Green fucking Lantern.
Right. Like, what can he do? Anything.
Just about anything. Even though she called him in, the real hero of this story, aside from Hacker, is Oracle. She definitely was the strong lady in charge and she was able to throw her weight around and make people understand that she wasn't going to put up with her shit.
Yeah, it's a fantastic arc, and it's a shame, we don't really see her anymore, in the remainder of the title, because she really fit into it.
Absolutely.
If this had gone on farther, I would have loved to have seen, her as a supporting cast member. The next story arc, Working Class Hero, it's really, really good. Because like I said earlier, Hacker, incredibly distrustful and of all, authority paradigm. And especially the more authoritarian you get, the more he distrusted. And there really weren't many more areas more authoritarian than, late 80s, early 90s China. And this story talks a lot about the political stuff that was going on at the time. Chris, do you remember seeing the Tiananmen Square protest of '89 with the tank stops for the guy, and then later on you hear about all the violence and stuff? Were you too young for that?
No, I was a little too young. I've seen the images and stuff, since then. But, at the time I would have been 8 or 9 years old. I wasn't really watching that stuff with my parents. I was probably swirled away somewhere reading comics or playing Nintendo.
There you go. What about you, Jesse? Do you remember any of this in real time, or is it just something that's that happened that you've seen? Because those images are iconic now.
Yeah,
everybody's seen them.
They are. Yeah, I'd probably be right there with Chris, probably playing Madden or Deion Sanders primetime football.
Tecmo Bowl.
I am probably the least political guy when it comes to paying attention to what's going on, no matter how much it's kind of forced down your throat anymore on social media. Unfortunately, you can't avoid it. But I mean, this was a very serious event that happened in Tiananmen Square. It's scary to think that there are governments out there like that with such a disregard for the people that they are supposed to try and protect. So yeah, a lot of violence that was going on, and a lot of scary times at that point in time in our history. So yeah, I remember it occurring. It's just that I can tell you this is probably the most I ever read about.
Well, I know y'all are going to be shocked about this, but I actually paid attention to it. I was 10 years old. It's fucking
oh wow,
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, but y'all two both follow me on Facebook, unless y'all blocked me or muted me or what the fuck ever. And I wouldn't blame you if you did, but so y'all know I'm a very political person, and I have been my whole life. Even then, I was like, what is happening? This is important stuff. Now, I don't remember much other than seeing it happen. I don't remember having. I've been thinking it was bad,
yeah.
But I don't. It's not I didn't write a dissertation about it or some shit.
People were dying. I mean, that's horrible. It was a horrible display that was caught on camera. It's just it was really scary.
Yeah, and I remember it affected me then. Like I said, I remember thinking it was bad, and of course, as you've learned more and more about it, in the years since, you're it's really even more harrowing. And sadly, too, that isn't just something that happens other places. Obviously, police brutality is a problem here and stuff, too, and, not just here, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia. I could show you liberal democracies that have these problems, too, but very rarely have we had, in the last, 40 to 55 years, have we had government in the so-called West be that antagonistic and just that absolute bloody towards especially unarmed students. But basically, there's a gentleman who is working in the Digitronics factory, literally working in it in China, and he had he had left his small village with his girlfriend, and they wound up one of the ultimate wrong fucking place, wrong fucking time moments, because they were just going to check out and see what the haps were. I didn't know what they thought about it really. So they actually get spotted at the Tiananmen Square protest with the leader of the whole thing, and wind up separated, in the maelstrom and everything. Now the gentleman's name is Yi. His girlfriend, Yon King, she is able to escape. She has relatives in the States. They're able to bring her over, but he stays there, gets in touch with his family, because now everybody's looking for these two, because they got saw with the leader right before the shit hit the fan. So everybody thinks they know where this person's at. They think that they're instrumental, cornerstone people of the movement.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the Chinese government, any entity in this situation, wants to crush all forms of resistance at that moment. So he gets in touch with his family, who gets him in touch with some extended family in Shanghai, and they're like, look, this is your name now. We got you a job. Get out of here. We can't do anything else for you, or else, we'll get in trouble. So he goes, and his job is in, a sweatshop in the, working for Digitronics, making their computers. Jesse, in a very unhappy accident, he learns that it turns out that Digitronics is recording everything. And like I said, their computers are everywhere, from if you had a personal computer in the DC universe, you had a Digitronics, the Justice League had them, Oracle, Batman, the Pentagon, everybody's got these computers, and they're recording everything that everybody's saying.
Yeah, dude. Information is the currency of government, I swear. This is Have you guys seen the meme? So I hate to do this, but have you seen the meme where there's a lady baking cookies and they're doing a comparison like from 1950s about how the government's or recording information is bad, and then there could be a spy, and then you have the lady down baking cookies in 2018. It says wiretap, please give me a recipe for cookies.
Right.
So this is another shining example of how ahead of the times this book was.
Yeah.
I mean, this shit is relative today, and you're reading it as it occurred in 1992, or at least an idea of what could potentially happen. So yeah, this is a threat. This is a threat. And I would say that when we get into this story, this is the more real of the 4 story arcs that we get out of this series.
Right.
It's a scary thought. Again, I'll use the word scary 20 times tonight, and probably another 20 times more, because our reliance upon technology, where did that technology come from? Who put that technology in there? Those are answers a lot of people don't know. Yeah, Digitronics did.
It was Digitronics, obviously.
The question is, did you trust them? So, see what I did there?
I'm picking up what you're putting down. That's for sure. Chris, that was something that I want to get your thoughts on too. Was I sent a screenshot of the page where they're like, oh my God, they're recording everything to a group chat I'm in. And I said, how prescient was this? I mean, This is 1992, Chris. I mean, we were young, obviously,
right.
But I don't think was anybody in your life super worried that everything that they said or did could be recorded?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Big Brother. Wasn't the fear at the time. At least not in my circles.
Right.
It would have.
If I had been reading it at the time, that would have been my first
exposure to the idea, really, and it probably would have scared me. And that's what we're pretty much living with now. Like, that danger is in every iPhone and every laptop. Smart technology is exactly what it is.
I want to ask a real question here. Have any of you seen something pop up on your Facebook, like an ad or something like that, and you're just like, oh, I was just talking about that yesterday? That's happened to me at least 15 times, and I can't believe how accepting we are of that.
Right.
And
I haven't had that experience, but I'll search for something on YouTube, and 10 minutes later I'll go to Google and I'll start to type something, and my YouTube search will pop up in the predictive text.
I'm telling you, they're listening, man.
It's all connected. So.
All right, y'all. So eerie stuff here. You're going to notice a little gap there, because while we were talking about wiretaps, all of a sudden I got cut out. They cut out old Dean Killer Compton. I tell y'all what, because it's too dangerous for me to talk about. But yeah, one of the things that we were mentioning is how the computer just knows. The computer knows now. Like, if I go look at an action figure on Amazon.com, I don't buy it. Then I go to Facebook or Twitter, motherfucker, there's an ad for that action figure right there, or something similar, And all the time, this happens to me all the time, where I'm talking, and then I'll be like, I'm thinking about getting a Jason versus Freddy action figure. I go to Facebook, it's like, you want to watch Jason versus Freddy? You want to watch it? You know what I mean? But they're on to us, but we're on to them too. So we've got this going on. But so Yi, though, back to what this is about, the story, he finds out that this is recording stuff through an unhappy accident. He tells his foreman, who tells the boss, the big boss, who then tells the guy that the Chinese government has sent to find Yi. And then sadly, Yi gets tortured for a while. In the meantime, back in the States, we figured out that, Marshall has gone to confront his friend Yoshio, who wrote the virus that was fucking with Pentagon. But he's not really a bad guy. He never really intended it for it to be used that way. And it turns out, Jesse, that his account is being utilized by someone else. That someone else is Sutcliffe.
Yeah, we got some dirty dealings yet again with Sutcliffe, which is not surprising. He's got a nefarious plan for whatever he's going to do here. And what a shithead Sutcliffe is. I mean, geez.
he's not going to get invited to my block party. That's for sure. Like we're not having him over anytime soon. So Chris, one of the things that I found very interesting with Working Class Hero is this is kind of the moment where we kind of see Yoshio take a big turn. Yoshio had been, Jack's friend. They had tacos together, but then when Jack got fired, he totally sided with Digitronics, kind of sold out, got himself a great car.
Looking out for himself.
But now we're starting to see that turn where he's kind of upset that that he's involved in shady business. What were your opinions of the Yoshio character and his growth, which I was really impressed with personally?
Yeah, it was nice to see him kind of, I don't know if he felt guilty, but he definitely seemed like he had some remorse for the way he treated his friend to begin in their past interactions.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I think, it's also possible, Jesse, that he was upset because he built that virus, but he never intended for it to be used this way. And I think maybe he was like, how dare you do this with something I created?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that you don't let that genie out of the bottle. If you shouldn't have created it in the first place. Now, I understand the guy didn't intend on doing anything with it, but unfortunately, the company that he's working for, it's a little bit more shady. And because he should have known who he was involved with, but regardless, his intentions were noble. He didn't intend to do anything nefarious with it in any way. His relationship with Jack, I thought, was pretty interesting there at the beginning. I thought these guys were like going to be hardcore enemies, and I thought Yoshio was going to be like this corporate stooge. And then, just like you said, this character evolves. I could see now that their friendship was something that, unfortunately, go to the back burner because Yoshio remained employed while Jack was sent on his way. Now we get to see these two finally kind of work together and put all that shit behind them.
Yeah, it was nice. They kind of bury the hatchet, and, Yoshio uses his clout with Digitronics and with his uncle, who supplies the chips that Digitronics needs, to get them into the factory. Jack uses his ex-wife, actually, who goes to talk to her, who still works for Digitronics, to get some stuff that will help them get into the plant without tripping any alarms. Although it doesn't work out quite as well as eventually it doesn't work out quite as well as they'd like for it to. But they go to China, and in the meantime, like I said, Yi's being tortured. And the reason that they get involved, I fucking put the cart before the horse, but the reason they get involved is Yoshio knows Yi's girlfriend, his fiance. And she, because like I said, she had managed to get to the States. She managed to get to Dallas, which is where Digitronics is headquartered. And saying, she met Yoshio. And, Chris, it looked like both old Hacker and Yoshio had a bit of the hots for her, even though she's a taken lady.
Yeah, for sure. Hacker was definitely interested. He didn't really try and hide the fact.
Not even a little, right? Like, she's like, hey, and she asked him, she's like, hey, will you help me get my fiance out? And he's like, yeah. and then she's like, well, I got to go. He's like, so soon? Why don't you stick around a little bit? Like, what the fuck, bro? Have a little respect, Jack. I mean, but all's well that obviously ends well. They get over to China. And in the plant, like I said, they are able, they go in under like false pretenses trying to use Yoshio's clout. And, that doesn't work. It's just like trying to put a screen door on a submarine.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen. What are you doing here? And they figure out that it's Jack Marshall. They kick him out. They go back with the devices that Jack was able to get from his ex-wife, and, who they have an interesting relationship to. But I'd rather people listening, when you read it, kind of see that, because it's one of the most interesting parts of the book. But there's no way we could possibly do it the justice it deserves, because it's a complicated relationship. They obviously still have a lot of feelings for each other, care for each other a lot. But they're able to get in, of course, but, it doesn't work that well. They all wound up getting thrown in a holding cell. Jesse, guess who's there?
None other than Yi.
Not me, the character Yi.
That's right.
Come all ye faithful.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so... what a serendipitous moment here, as here Jack looks at Yi and is like, I presume you're Yi. And Yi's like, what how in the hell do you... right. So this is Digitronics they're in, right? They're in
it's
Digitronics plant.
Digitronics sweatshop, yeah.
Just imagine that. You go into work one day, you accidentally go downstairs, and there's the torture room. My bad.
Right.
They've got a prison cell in the basement.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I expected to see today. But yeah, that's the environment that this place is. That's a bad situation to be in.
Well, this is the moment when they figure out that they're recording everything everything because he tells them, they put me here because I found this out. Like, wait a minute. Yeah. And of course, then they're like, but what the fuck are they going to do with all this info? It's too much. And that's when they figure out, Chris, that's what the virus is for. The virus is going to sort the information and route the stuff that they want where they want it. Why was it cool to you, like, Chris? Because like for me, watching these guys, reading these guys sort this stuff out in a prison cell, It was like I had the light bulb moment too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had, given that I don't have much acumen for the computer, any of this hacker stuff, or even by today's standards, I'm not much for technology. If it's super easy to use, I can handle it. But basically, they were basically explaining it to me as I was reading it, and so I was kind of catching up to them the whole time. So I wasn't. I was surprised, and it was cool seeing them go through it in a prison cell where, just them talking about it could tip their hand, because it was pretty obvious, even I think Marshall, after they realized what was going on, was like, hey, we got to keep it down because
there's a bug. Listening. Yeah, probably a bug right above us. If there's going to be
if they're recording random computers, they're certainly recording their own prison cell.
Exactly. That was one of the things that I put in here as well. Is they, as they're discussing this, they go through and explain very real logistic problems in regards to getting all this information and storing it, which when you look at that in today's standards, not a problem.
Not nearly the problem. With cloud technology, you can do whatever you want. As far as that stuff goes, you can just, everybody's always trying to sell me gigs. They're always trying to sell me, like, do you need 50 gigs? Do you need 50 gigs? Dropbox, you want 50 gigs? Google Drive, you want 50 gigs? And anybody who wants some gigs can have them now. These guys would go nuts about that. Can you imagine, Jack Marshall in today's world, like, oh my God, cloud technology. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're able to get out of the jail cell with a device that, Jack had hidden in his underwear, because Sutcliffe is actually the guy who captures them, but then he but he didn't want to go into his underwear, apparently, when he searched them. That's what Jack says. So he's able, they're able to get out. They actually encounter, they steal a gun. Yi steals a gun from from a guard that they overpower. And when they're figuring out how they're going to get Yi out of the place, and they're like, we're going to ship him. We're put him in a fucking box, ship him to America. But at that moment, the guy looking for him, I think he's like a colonel in the Chinese army, shows up, and he and Yi have an ideological, a standoff, Jesse, that's like really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Here we have somebody who is dedicated to the rule of the Chinese, whatever that government was, who's got, at one point, has Yi at gunpoint, and luckily they get the drop on him. They point the gun at him, and he, this general, says, "Okay, well, what's next?" Drops his gun, and Yi looks at him and says, "You know what? I'm not going to kill you, because the people the ideas that I believe in do not support that thinking." And he lays his own gun down. And about that time, Hacker and Yoshio are like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" And he says, "You make the call." He pretty much puts it back into the general's hand. At that time, the general could reach down, pick his gun back up, and we're back to square one. It's going to be trouble all over again. But luckily, a cool head prevails. Plus, this general's, he's been around the block. This guy isn't somebody that just, became a general. He has been a general for quite a while, and he realizes that the government isn't about it isn't about what it used to be. Now it's all about money. And that is where he's just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm tired of working for these guys too. So, and he's just like, what box do you want? We'll pack you right up.
Right. This is, about 20 years after, China's basically entry into, semi-capitalism, a very controlled capitalistic economy. And it's probably the start of when, within like 3 or 4 years of when they really go into hyperdrive, when they're really going to, because you hear about that now, this China, the Chinese economy, what it can do, what they're doing worldwide, the investments they're making. Well, around this time is when, that kind of started, and the general felt, I think like anybody else, Chris, he was unenchanted with the way things were going. And he looked back on his life and he's like, I believed in something and now it's all been sold out.
Right. So, kind of disillusioned with the way the government's going.
Because, it's different. Like he believed in, Maoism, and that was what had driven China. And that's what he wanted something more similar to that, even though he also points out, he goes, listen, this is all, these guys use you students as pawns all the time. He wanted something more similar to that. And he really hated that it was going toward money. So it seemed like it's a good time for him to just get out. That's what it seems.
Right.
What do you think he does after this?
He looks like he's pushing 80, so I'm not sure what else he's got to look forward to after this. Assuming he's not, imprisoned for helping them escape. Assuming that they think he helped them escape. So I mean, I'm sure his career is over, whether it be by choice or by court martial or whatever. But
I would my idea of him walking into a Chinese government office and saying I'm retiring, I don't think that would go over so well. I think that there would probably be a little bit of backlash. I don't know how that government entity would react.
He may be manning a radio tower somewhere for the rest of his day.
Yeah. You are stationed here.
At best. I mean, because he's pretty dangerous because, he literally knows where the bodies are buried.
Yeah.
So, you can't really let somebody with that kind of knowledge just, walk away. And, who does get away is, hacker Yoshio. And sure enough, a few days later, here's Yi in a box showing up in Dallas. And, no worse for the wear somehow.
I guess he's eating those packing peanuts.
Right.
I hope he didn't have to use the bathroom. That was a concern of mine.
I hope they figured out something for him to do for a little bit at least. I'd also be worried about asphyxiation, but I don't know. I mean, Hacker's got this figured out, right?
That's right.
And that's going to lead us into the very last story arc showdown, which was only 2 issues. Actually, before I get to this, I do want to point out, I don't want to talk about it too much, but it was interesting. There was like a story within a story in the working class hero art, which is, there was it was like a similar story, but it was done in I don't know the word. It wasn't quite a manga style, Jesse, but it was something like, something similar to that.
You tell me if I'm way off here, okay? Because I expect you would probably know, or Chris, hop in here. It felt like propaganda pieces.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Okay, right. And it felt like something you would find that the Chinese government would hand to, the students that are in school at a certain period of time, and they're like, hey, you're about to become a working class citizen. Here you go.
Right.
And it tells the story of, oh my goodness, I think if I remember correctly, it's about a Chinese person growing up, having to go to work, and the family that he grew up in first off, and the family that he tries to raise. And it felt very much like a piece of propaganda.
Yeah. I'll tell you what they reminded me of, and it's probably because I've just been reading up on some of this stuff lately, is Chick Tracts. They're like gospel tracts that were produced in the 80s. They're like tiny booklets that are like comic books, almost like the size of comic strips.
I got you.
And I mean, they were used for, evangelicals to push how evil Dungeons and Dragons are. And so they were basically propaganda tracks. They're basically propaganda tracks. And that's what they reminded me of, like the Chinese government's version of those.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because the guy who invented Chick Tracts, Jack Chick, who started Chick Ministries, he actually got the idea for the tracks when he was stationed in Korea during the Korean War, which during the Korean War, the Chinese fought it. It was America versus China and Korea. America, United Nations forces, but China backed North Korea during the war. So, and they actually used comic strips as propaganda to try and get the American people to, like, American troops quit, or to at least, demoralize them. One of the things they would do was point out how bad black people had it in America. They would have these tracts that were, comic strips, to be like, why are you fighting for these guys? When you go home, you get to be segregated. I mean, a fair point, in all honesty, that was true, is what was going on. So, I should have picked up on that, but you're absolutely right. They're very Chick Tract-esque. And I ironically love Chick Tracts and have collected them for a long time.
I'm the same, yeah.
Because they're just hateful, man. They're weird and hateful, and I've seen them my whole life. And when I got older, I was like, oh, these are awful, but somehow amazing. And let's be
and
honest.
The art
too,
on some of them is really good, surprisingly.
really good. And let's be honest too, Jack Chick is probably the most read comic book illustrator of all time.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that touted, and it's probably true.
It's probably true, because you can get these anywhere, the gas station, church, you've seen him at Dragon Con, like all kinds of places. But yeah, it definitely has a chick tract vibe to it. And definitely, one of the very fun part of that storyline, although there's not a whole lot we can really go into about it because it kind of just, like I said, it's a propaganda piece. It is what it is. But Showdown is where everything comes to, a head. They figure out that they're sending a bunch of stuff to Kazakhstan, which is a former Soviet Socialist Republic, and they talk about the fall of the Soviet Union and how, it's very destitute there at that time, that when they dropped the price controls, when Boris Yeltsin did that, they got the stuff, but then didn't nobody have no money for it. So it didn't matter. So when all this money starts getting pumped into Kazakhstan, nobody really, asks much questions about it because now there are jobs, there's money, etc. People don't have to break into people's houses to steal food. And this was a real problem in the former Soviet Socialist republics at the time. And, and again, this isn't dissimilar to, lots of stuff here. If somebody shows up with a bunch of money and builds a business, even if the business, dumps shit in the water and it's killing fish, there are going to be people who are like, well, what about the jobs? Right. I mean, so it's very human nature-esque. But they figure out, Jesse, that Digitronics is building an AI. They're building an artificial intelligence to process all of the information that the virus is going to route to them that they're recording. Honestly, dude, Jesse, that's when it really, really becomes firm to me that, this is a DC Universe comic because they're going to build a fucking robot guy.
Yeah, they've got to take steps to, and I hate to say that because this comic was great on its own. I love the fact that we're throwing DC superheroes in here. That's awesome. But they told a great story without that. And that's fine. But yeah, it's time we start putting this technology to some type of super use. As grounded and as real as this series is, unfortunately, you've got to make it feel like it's going to fit in with the rest of the universe somehow. So there we go. I'm not going to call that a misstep. I'm going to call that a product of the time that they're at the time and the place that they're living in. So, yeah, man, AI. Well, I'll tell you right now, if there isn't anything that you're more afraid of in 1992, you might as well be afraid of it here in 2018 because sooner or later the robots are coming.
So one of the things I wanted to point out about this too, though, and Chris, I'll get your comments first, though, is I think I like having the Justice League Europe and having the DC guys in it, but it's one of those things where they're trying to build a robot guy, they're trying to build an AI.
Yeah.
Aren't there already 65,000 AIs in the DC
right? You would
universe?
think that the Flash would be what's the big deal? We take care of this kind of thing all the time.
No offense. Right. It's like, remember he punches Brainiac all the time. We do this. The thing is they do a good job of separating that. If you ask me, Jesse, where you're oh my God, they're building an AI, and it's only a few pages later when you see Justice League Europe and they have their big monitor where they're already FaceTiming people and everything in 1992. You're actually, you guys already have technology way beyond this, don't you?
Yeah. That's that just did not feel like a puzzle piece that fit in there for some reason, because you're just well, wait a second. Okay, now we're in this world that is way more advanced and has faced threats very similar to this in the past. What is the big concern? Now, it's a concern for Jack, and that I can believe. I mean, he probably has a better understanding that this thing's very much going to be a threat if it's in the wrong hands. Here's our villain for Showdown. It's AI. Aleph, if I remember correctly. Is that the name of the project?
Yeah, Aleph is the name.
Aleph.
Yep, Aleph is the name of it. It's the Aleph conspiracy is what they call it. And once he figures this out, he knows that he needs a lot of help because it's hard to get into Kazakhstan. So he contacts Justice League Europe, and when he gets a hold of them, he gets over there. It's really funny. First off, he calls Elongated Man Plastic Man. So good on you, right off. Good stuff. But isn't it funny, Chris, how he's talking to Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan's well, I trust you. They're talking they're old fucking buddies. The last time you saw this guy, you picked him up with your ring by the pants.
Do you know, was his other appearance in the DCU, was that after this series had concluded, or?
I believe it was.
So they, have had very little interaction. So there's not much reason for him to trust the guy. It wouldn't seem like.
Especially when Jesse Catherine Colbert says she doesn't trust him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just playing a little bit of devil's advocate. I don't really necessarily agree with this, but I could see how, people who were fans of this book might be kind of annoyed that they're putting the Justice League in there, as it's been fairly real world for the most part. And then now we're going to throw the Flash in there so we can have him search the building, in a split second or whatever. It didn't bother me at all, but I can see how maybe some fans at the time may not have liked that.
Well, speaking of the Flash, I love how the Flash gets his comeuppance, I guess you would say, as he's running through the building, checking everything out, including the hot babe at the desk, and runs into a damn door, knocking himself out.
Yeah, he goes fucking Wayne's World on this, because he's like, whoa, a major babe. He literally calls her a major babe. And then he runs to the door, knocks himself out. And of course, it's important to note too, this was not out of character for the Flash at this time. Wally West was portrayed as kind of I don't want to say a womanizer, but he was definitely a young man who was, sowing his wild oats. He wasn't tied down. And he didn't mind telling a lady that they, he thought they were attractive. He did mind when they rebuffed him, usually with a slap. He minded then, but this was not out of character for him. I really like too, Jesse, when at the end, at the end of the next to last issue, number 11, they have him tied up. They have the Flash, captured now, and he's like, the Kazakhstan guy who speaks with like a Slavic Russian type accent is like, we have Amerikansky superhero, Flash Man.
Well,
right?
I feel for the Flash, who's tied up in this vault practically. He took his own self out of the equation by knocking himself out. So here he is, Wally West, tied up. I do want to kind of just reiterate what Chris had said in regards to how some fans didn't like the fact that we now have, Justice League Europe involved in this storyline. I felt that when I was reading this. I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to process this as well as I have the previous issues dealing with some of the more real world stuff. Their involvement, I think, was necessary to make this feel like a DC comic, but it definitely wasn't necessary in order to fulfill the story, because really, again, our main characters and our hero here have to be Hacker, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But I think what they did right was like most of it isn't Justice League Europe, running in, ring slinging. Like Power Girl was like, I'll just go smash the whole thing. And they're like, well, you can't do that, I mean, it's not going to work. Most of it was more Justice League Europe, and in particular, Catherine Colbert using their name, that brand, because that brand has power. And it's like, listen, we're here. And I think they did a good job of that, because the Justice League doesn't really save the day. They don't, like I said, they don't bust in and take down the bad guys. In the end, it's Hacker, I mean, although Green Lantern does run interference for him, and it's pretty awesome, when you're like, they go into a room because they're going to take this out once and for all. It's a Hacker, Yoshio, and Freaky Freddy, who did not forget his Freddy hat, even though he was cold. That's brilliant. He had it anyway. So good for you, Freddy Krueger forever. I appreciate that. It would have been a Jason Voorhees mask for me. That's what I'd have been rocking. But they go into that room, and Hal Jordan's like, I'll run interference for you guys. He's like, nobody's going to get in here. And like the drawing that Tom Sutton did, it just did his fit, like just with the body language, Jesse, you're like, yep, nobody's getting past Hal today.
Yeah, that's right. He did a very good job of making me believe that it's on. This guy's got everything under control. Oh yeah, man, we got the virtual reality stuff going on in here too.
Right, that's what we're about to get to. Yeah, so we get to see like the virtual reality helmets, and it's all fucking awesome. It's all just glorious 90s tech, right? Like it's just how we thought virtual reality would look at the time with like, movie, I can't remember.
Just past Max Headroom style.
Right. I think there was a movie around the same time called like Virtuosity, where like it's about like a serial killer in an AI. I can't remember exactly, but this was a big deal, and everybody had to put on those big helmets and like the things on their hands and all that. And then Chris, we're going to have a show. We're literally going to have a showdown inside this thing once Jack gets inside.
Yeah, they had alluded to his his fondness for this computer game where he, like a Western themed
Toe to the West.
Yeah. And so when he gets into the VR to face off with the AI, who is very Sutcliffe themed, that's kind of the mode he chooses to face him in.
It's funny you mentioned that because I noticed today going back through, I think that might have been the game he was playing in the very first page of the first issue.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. Nice callback.
Yeah. No, they set that up the whole time, and it turns out that he has put this game on every Digitronics computer, and this is like the ultimate, really?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like, really? Because he wanted to be able to play it wherever he went. What?
That's awesome. That's typical hacker shit, though. I mean, somebody that's a computer programmer, I completely see that being something that somebody would do.
It seems funny, though. Let me ask you, Chris, if you could input any one game to where you could play it anywhere you went, what game would it be?
I'm really not much on video games. So the game I've probably played the most outside of like maybe Tetris. It might be Tetris.
That's a good one.
But
as it turns out, you can just play Tetris anywhere, though.
Yeah, you can already. I can do that on my phone already.
Right.
But it would either be like an NBA Live game from the late 90s, like NBA Live 99 maybe, or Perfect Dark for N64, which I still play to this day, and I love that game.
I got Sim City running for the SNES right now, so I understand loving your old school game. What about you, Jesse? You get to program a game into the computer. You can play it anywhere you go. What
I will take Super Metroid for 1,000, please. That is the game. I will always go back to that. Super Metroid's where it's at.
I've never played it, but I got an SNES Classic a few weeks ago, and I'm really looking forward to playing it. I always wanted to, and never got a chance to. I think for me, it would probably be Mega Man 2.
That's a good one.
I love playing Mega Man. I love Mega Man 2. It's the best one as far as I'm concerned. But none of those games are the games that Hacker plays. He plays Code of the West. I don't want to ruin the ending too much, but the good guys do win, and it's one of those, Jesse, where you ask a robot a paradox and its head blows up or some shit.
Yeah.
It's one of those things because he's able to make this AI play the game since it's built on Digitronics, play his game. But of course the AI is like, I'll always win. But as it turns out, Jesse, because he'll always win, it means it must lose.
That's right. There is no way out, apparently, for this AI, and he did a good job. It's going to be wrapped up playing tic-tac-toe. That's a metaphor, ladies and gentlemen. That doesn't actually happen. But yeah, it's no longer a threat, thank goodness. Unfortunately, here in the real world, 3 years later, after this series drops, Project Aleph is released upon the world, and the Virtual Boy hits store shelves. Oh man, that bomb. Anyway,
it took me a second. No, that was dude. You said it bombed before I got it. You know what I mean? I was like, you're like Project, because I was sitting here and everything was going through my mind. I was like, yeah. I mean, Operation Sun Devil had happened. We talked about it. I was trying to think of the real world thing that had happened, and then I was like, oh my god, he said Virtual Boy, which you're right.
1995, ladies and gentlemen, the Virtual Boy hits the shelves.
Yeah. Then it hit some kids, and that's really hard.
Gives a lot of headaches.
Yeah. I wanted one, but there's just no way I could. I have vertigo issues. There's no way I could have played it. But there's also no way it could have really been any good, to be honest. At the time. But nice one, to be honest. Yeah. Next time, ladies, give us a second. Chris got it too. Let it cook before you serve it. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
But all's well that ends well, sort of. While all this is going on, Sutcliffe says, you know what? I'm not going to try and stop you guys anymore, which is really nice. He's literally been trying to kill these guys for 12 issues and everything. It's pretty cool that now that they're about to get something done, he's like, well, I'm not going to try and stop you, but I'm also not going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And while this is going on, he cuts a deal. And Hacker doesn't like that a whole lot, Chris. But I think that's a very appropriate ending for the book because while all's well that ends well, it's not really all that well. The bad guy's not really going to get a whole lot of of comeuppance, but that's probably how this would work. He's going to go cut a deal because he's a rich guy. He's got his own plane, and he mentions that to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's really it seems true to life. It wasn't even a huge surprise, honestly, that he didn't end up in a jail cell or whatever. It rarely did those types end up in that situation when all's said and done.
Yeah, I want to say that I wondered if the writing was on the wall for this series at this time. I assume that you get at least, I don't know, a month or two ahead notice that your series is going to end. I'm assuming that. I would hope that was the case. Now, if I remember right, like in the letters pages at the beginning, our writer here had 8 stories ready to go at the end of issue 1.
Yeah, he said 3 years worth of material.
Wow. So here we are at issue 12. I don't know if anything was rushed. I don't feel like it was, in my opinion. I mean, Dean, do you think this was rushed to an ending between Sutcliffe, or was this just, okay, this is the end of that chapter?
No, I don't think it was rushed at all. Here's the deal. And you'll notice this about a lot of comic books from around this time, from let's say 86, 87 to 95, 96 or so. Neil Gaiman mentions this when he first started writing Sandman. He said, what I expected was that around issue 6 or 7, they'd be like, listen, you're a critical success. You're not making any money. We're going to wrap it up after issue number 12. And I think that was kind of the deal. At that time we had, we got away from like the 60s and 70s where like if a book wasn't selling enough, like, fuck it, cancel it. Like, well, we're in the middle of a story. Well, either we'll never finish it or we'll finish it in, an anthology title, or we'll finish it in a backup somewhere, but this title's gone now. I think at this time there had been, a thing where it's like, what, we'll do 12 issues. We'll do a whole year. So it kind of, evens out. We'll give this guy a chance to wrap everything up. This isn't the only title like that. Now, very interestingly, Wikipedia has this listed as a miniseries, but it never really, it always seemed like it was supposed to be an ongoing. And it was listed like you could subscribe to it as an ongoing. So I think that's a mistake on Wikipedia's part. What about you, Chris? Do you feel like the ending was rushed, or you feel like everything came to a head nicely?
I thought it was wrapped up pretty well. It could be that he had other stories, waiting in the wings that had other villains or, other characters for him to interact with. I didn't really feel like it was rushed. It seemed like around that time, it was rare to see a book canceled before it got to about a year.
Right.
Outside of like maybe in the mid 90s when the crash hit and they were getting desperate. Most books stuck around at least for a year because, you're even if it's not a very successful book, you're probably not losing money on each issue. So it seemed like they would give creative teams a chance to gain an audience. And
I think they respected the audience they had gained more at that time too. They're like, listen, we don't want to just like not finish a story.
Right.
Like, let's get to a point where it can wrap up nicely.
Yeah, so I didn't think it was necessarily rushed. I'm sure he had, if, like you said in the letters page, I didn't notice it, but if he had several years worth, planned out, he just didn't get a chance to get to the rest of those stories. But I didn't feel like it was anything that was slapped together at the end to put a bow on it.
No, I didn't either, but we're about to put a bow on this bad boy here. So we'll get some final thoughts from everybody. Jesse, like, what's your final thoughts? Your opinion about the series? Do you recommend it?
Oh, absolutely. Hacker Files. I mean, you look at this. This is a comic that was dealing with computers, technology, and the government on a very realistic scale. There's plenty out there at this time relying on advanced science fiction. That our comic books were rife with that throughout the 80s, 90s. But nothing out there at this time that I feel was as grounded as this series was. Now, 26 years later, though, I can see Louis Shiner intended to bring the drama of technological espionage to comic fans, but I can kind of also understand why it didn't appeal to many of those that were reading at the time, as computer and internet use was just beginning to slowly rise. Now, we covered that a little bit earlier. It would take another 2 years before I think things really took off for me. A couple years later, I'm sitting there on the computer and I know what Yahoo is. I'm not dialing up and connecting to the bulletin board systems like I used to. Now I've got an internet to look at.
Right.
But with
the
all
web.
that, that's right. Surfing the web. Let me throw this one last note in there, and then I'll finish up with what I'm saying. The one thing I made sure to kind of point out to you guys was how kind of on the bleeding edge this series was. There's a point in here where I think Jack uses the term surf the net or surfing the net. And this is 1992 when this comic was published. I went to a site called netmom.com. Now, that's because I just looked up Yeah, that sounds kind of skeezy. But I just did a search for that when this term originated, okay? And according to this, in June 6th of 1991, see, they're able to actually narrow this shit down to the second because back then, bulletin board systems or places of business that were using computer systems have all these recorded logs. But it said
literally down to the second.
Yeah. It says there's also the use of the term going net surfing, which turns up in a June 6, 1991 comp.admin policy post by Brendan Kehoe, where he says, here's a question. How do other people deal with users that they think are doing no-nos around the net? That sounds familiar. One of our users had the habit of occasionally going net surfing and doing the hit and run type of attempts. So I don't know what exactly he's talking about there, but that is like one of the first times that term is being used. And here, I think less than a year later, we're seeing it being used in a comic book. So that is like kind of how bleeding edge this is. Now, nowadays, terms pop up and are used and are gone probably within a month or two. Again, this series was so ahead of its time. I'm glad I had the opportunity to read it. Now, with all that said, I think this is definitely, Hacker Files is definitely a great series that I would recommend to anybody, especially anybody that's really interested in that era of technology. I think they would find a good reading experience here.
All right, Chris, what are some of your final thoughts? Do you recommend it? Did you, overall, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, man, I liked it. It was not the kind of book that I would normally gravitate to. I do read a lot of superhero comics and also read, a lot of image books and stuff that isn't necessarily superhero centric. But like the technology, the computer stuff, hackers, that's not something I've really been drawn to. But I still enjoyed the book quite a bit, a lot more than I actually thought I was going to be honest. But I liked it a lot. I thought that it almost would have probably worked better as a standalone outside of the DCU, even though I liked seeing the characters in there because I'm a fan of them. It almost felt more like something that would be a Vertigo book today, or even something like Sleeper, which Wildstorm put out probably 10 or 12 years ago. And it was kind of its own thing, but there also were some Wildstorm characters that were referenced and I think showed up a few times. And that's kind of what I would liken it to. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it to fans of 90s comics. It's kind of an oddity because around this time, comics were really going towards the image style of big guns and super violent and everything was extreme. And this was totally different. So it definitely would have stood out. And that might be why it didn't make it as long, because it was so different from what was really selling at the time.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. It definitely, flew in the face of convention at the time. Look, I love this comic book. And we say this about a lot of comic books. You're like, oh, you'll never read another comic book like this. You will really never read another comic book like the Hacker File. But if you handed a 12-year-old kid in 1992 Hacker Files #1 or Spawn #1, 98 out of 100 are going to take Spawn, 97, like something like that. And that's no knock on either of these comics at all. It just was what it was. I think I like the superheroes being involved for no other reason. We got that cool fucking cover with like the disc with the Green Lantern logo on it. That was it for me. That was cool. I was like, send those out instead of the AOL discs, right? I loved the covers, which were we thought they were painted. I just looked them up. A guy named Tom Canty did them, and according to my comic shop, they were computer generated, which explains a lot of like why they look so off. I like the different art styles in there. Tom Sutton does a great job, but I like the part where they're in AI and it looks like the 90s cartoon reboot. Which my brother just fucking loves. And I want to give the inker Mark Buckingham a lot of credit too. He did a great job on the inks on the issues he did. And color in this book was really important too. Laverne Kinzerski did it. I can't pronounce that last name, so if you listen to this, Laverne, I'm very sorry. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong. But I want everybody to read it, and I wish that there was a way to make. I don't think this will ever get collected. I don't think it'll ever be reprinted. For the most part. But I wish there was a way and just get some notes from Louis Shiner about what was next. What other ideas he had, because I'm super interested in it, and I really really like this book, guys. Because again, it flies in the face of that narrative. Even if people didn't pick it up at the time because it wasn't like you said, it's a little out there, and maybe in some ways it was neither fish nor fowl. There it didn't quite go go all the way computer technological espionage stuff. Didn't go far enough that way, but had superheroes in it too. So like I said, maybe in some ways it was neither fish nor fowl to people, but I felt like it made a very compelling and incredibly prescient story, and I'd recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't discourage anybody, obviously, from reading. I thought it was a pretty entertaining and just a really interesting take on comics from that era. It was so different from everything else that was being put out.
Yeah, for real. Now, this was a little off the path, but next time when we come back to you with a spoken word edition of the Unspoken Decade, y'all, we're going to do Kingdom Come, which is decidedly, everybody knows about it, like on the beaten path. And we look forward to bringing you that in a couple of weeks. I'm Dean Compton for the Unspoken Decade, for Chris Armstrong and for Jesse Starcher. We'll be talking to you next time. Enjoy some 90s comics, everybody.